And we are back. I'm going to turn this over to City Attorney Tracy Noonan for the report of our closed session. Tracy?
Thank you, Mayor McNamee. I actually have nothing to report.
That was short, sweet, and to the point. Thank you very much. Let us all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Any requests for continuance? None? We have a special presentation and announcements. I would like to come around to the podium if I may. Madam Clerk, is that correct? Okay, let me come around. Proclamation recognizing a day that is synonymous with the character of our city. Earth Day is recognized in 192 countries around the world to celebrate and pledge to protect our natural environment. In Thousand Oaks, we combine this event with Arbor Day, in which we commit to preserving and enhancing our urban forests. This will be the city's 23rd annual recognition of Arbor Day, and we pride ourselves on our commitment to environmental sustainability, both in our municipal operations and in our community. As we develop our climate and environmental action plan, we will identify and commit to further actions to ensure our sustainability for future generations. Now, I'd like to introduce Rod Cordova, analyst for the Sustainability Division, to tell us about this year's planned festival. Rod?
Thank you, Mayor McNamee and members of the council. Yes, the city is once again hosting its annual Arbor Earth Day celebration. This year's event will take place on Saturday, April 15th at Thousand Oaks Community Park, which is right next to Thousand Oaks High School. The event will run from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. As Mayor McNamee mentioned, the event celebrates the environment, combining both Arbor Day and Earth Day into one event. This year's event will include educational workshops that will teach residents how to care for landscaping in a drought, how to install drip irrigation, and how to select drought-tolerant ground covers. We will also have an electric vehicle display where EV owners will display their vehicles, and they'll be available to answer questions from the public and provide firsthand experience and insight on EV ownership. We will have a plant giveaway, native plants, California native plants will be given away. There will be a tree giveaway. Athens Services will be on hand to answer questions about trash and recycling service, and they will be giving away free compost. They'll also have, and this is a crowd favorite, they all will also have their big trash truck bounce house for the kids. There will be kids' activities, games. The bicycle rodeo, which is a bicycle safety course, will be on hand again this year. And CRPD will be accepting used bikes for donation, which they donate to underserved youth in the community. There will be live music, raffles, and much more. So, and the City Sustainability Division will be seeking resident input regarding climate action and EV charger locations. So it's a free event, it's a family-friendly event. We invite you all to come out, celebrate the environment, and have some fun.
Thank you so much. And on behalf of the City of Thousand Oaks, City Council, myself as mayor, the proclamation of Arbor Earth Day 2023. And what is the date in which we're doing this celebration?
April 15th.
April 15th,
yes. Our Earth Day is actually April 22nd. We're hosting our event on April 15th.
And I know a council member here who has some children that will be in that bounce house, right? Council Member Taylor? Would council members join us in front for a photo opportunity? Next would be the Business Recognition Program, but unfortunately, due to scheduling changes, we'll be postponing that to a later date. So we'll move forward with our agenda this afternoon. We have public comments. City Clerk?
This is the time and place for public comments. Speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence for the record. 2 individuals have requested to speak, and pursuant to council standards, speakers are allowed 3 minutes. The yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. I'd also like to announce that Councilman Newman will be joining us remote, and wish him the best in recovery. And thank you for joining us, Councilman Newman. Appreciate that. First up, for public comment, we have Robert Ayres. Robert, you have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm Bob Ayres. I live here in Thousand Oaks. I've spoken here several times about a situation on my block, especially a drug house directly across the street from me. For over 2 years, we watched drugs bought, sold, and used out of that home. We've watched ambulances, fire trucks, police come to the house multiple times. We've watched people get arrested for weapons charges and possessing fentanyl and heroin with intent to sell. We even had our street shut down by the Los Angeles Police Department with machine guns and armored vehicles while a suspected murderer was arrested at this home. It's been a nightmare affecting our health and affecting our quality of life. But tonight, I'm not really here to talk about that. Instead, I'm here to thank Commander Paris and his entire department for doing such an amazing job helping us deal with the situation. They stayed on it. They never made me feel like that guy who continually called the non-emergency line reporting suspicious activity. Every time I called, they came. Over the 2 years, they arrested a lot of people out of that house. In fact, today, the 2 people who own the house are both in jail with multiple charges, including felony counts. Right now, the street's quiet. Thank you, all you cops. In addition to the police, other agencies, including code enforcement, the TO Water Division, Animal Control, and Social Services, all have responded to our concerns at this house. Working together along with the other neighbors on my block, we have made a difference. So my point is, Thousand Oaks has the ability to be a model city where people are not afraid or too busy to get involved. TO is our home, and when my family moved here over 30 years ago, it was a dream. The community was so committed to keeping it safe and clean. I'm not saying people don't want that anymore, but being committed requires action. The police and the city officials cannot do that alone. Again, I didn't like reporting what I suspected, but the police thanked me and it took some bad guys off the street, which makes it safer for me, you, the cops, and all our families. The police can't see everything and be everywhere all the time. I was just making phone calls, but maybe there are some ways as residents we can become more organized and proactive in this regard. So please, get involved. The citizens of TO can make a difference. We've got to look out for each other and be kind to each other. I have children and grandchildren here, and I want Thousand Oaks to be that dream city, the clean and safe community that I remember. Once again, the police and the code enforcement need our help. So if you're tired of looking at that pile of trash in your neighbors and your yards for months, call code enforcement. It's their job. They can't be everywhere at once. So let's help them protect the value of our properties and our quality of life. And thank you guys a bunch. And to the cops out there, all of you, thank you very, very much.
Mr. Ayres, thank you for those comments.
You're welcome.
Chief, great feedback. Thank you. Next up, we have CEO of our Caneo Chamber of Commerce, Danielle Borgia. Danielle, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor McNamee and council members. I wanted to share a couple of announcements. We have our recognition gala coming up on May the 19th. We are actually going to be at the Moore Park Teaching Zoo this year, so we're changing it up a bit, an outdoor gala under the stars. And our executive committee actually just met this morning, and we are making the rounds announcing some of our winners. And as you know, we recognize a variety of different categories: Business of the Year, Small Business of the Year, Volunteer of the Year, Nonprofit of the Year, Woman of the Year, which Tracy has had the honor of winning, and it comes to our Man of the Year. We want to recognize this person who has been such a champion for our business community for a number of years, but especially over these last 2 years, and is passionate about a number of different things that go into our economic environment, including housing, jobs, and quality of life. And we feel that this person deserves to be recognized for all of their work, both on the dais as well as in the community, championing the arts as one of the founders, the 100 founders of the Alliance for the Arts, as well as their work with the YMCA. And so, Al Adam, we are very excited to announce you. Or did that ring a bell at all? All that work you've done? We're very excited to honor you as our Man of the Year at our upcoming gala. So congratulations. I have some helpers. Come on over, Nora. It's one of your younger residents.
We have a little person approaching the podium. Welcome. Girl Scout cookies, this is always good, and balloons. Councilmember Adam, April 15th, Arbor Earth Day, we've got a bounce house for you. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. Next up, we have, and I'm not seeing any other public comments, is that correct? Very good. So let's move on. Assistant City Manager, any comments there?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank the resident, Bob Ayers, for calling in just to express his appreciation for our sheriff's office and the leadership under Jeremy Paris and mobilizing his officers to respond to the home in which he had concerns. And also just a hats off to our community development team. We do take pride in the work that we provide here as a city and being responsive to the needs of our residents. So really appreciate him calling in to express his appreciation. And then lastly, I certainly would like to congratulate our Mayor Pro Tem, Al Adam, on his recognition. Danielle reached out to me earlier today, and it took everything in me just to keep it quiet. And I was looking forward to seeing the surprise look on your face. So congratulations.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to consent calendar 10. Are there any questions or anything that wants to be pulled from council members? Nope, we're good. Let's move into then the next is that we need a motion. And do we have any speakers on this? No. Could I have a motion to accept the consent calendar?
Move the consent calendar.
Consent calendar has been moved. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Newman,
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adam,
Yes.
and Mayor McNamee.
Yes.
And that motion passes 4-0 with Councilmember Engler absent.
Madam Clerk, do you have to read 10C, the ordinance title?
I do. Thank you very much. Ordinance amending sections 1-8.106, 1-8.108, 1-8.110, 1-8.113, 1-8.114, 1-8.115, 1-8.117, 1-8.124, 1-8.125, and 1-8.126 of Municipal Code regarding council meetings and procedures. And that's ordinance number 1711-NS.
You did that so well. Thank you. Let's move to public hearings 11s. Madam Clerk?
Hearing advertised as required by law is open to consider agenda item 11A, Municipal Code Amendment to repeal residential resale requirements, MCA 2023-70002. Speakers are requested to state their name for the record. And we have one individual who has presented a speaker card, and pursuant to council standards, that individual will have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I believe we have here we are. Tim McDougall, please, you have comment there at the podium.
Thank you very much. Nice to see everyone. Thank you for your service.
Tim, I made an error. I'm going to ask you to stand down for just a moment because we're supposed to have a presentation
I
first.
thought there was something missing here. I wanted to just comment to the staff thing, but let's
Tim,
hear that first.
Tim, I need you to keep me on track here. Thank you, sir. Give you your exercise for the day. So with that, let's go to Municipal Code Amendment to repeal residential resale requirements and city staff. Assistant City Manager Ingrid Hardy. Ingrid?
Yeah, I just wanted to, thank you, Mayor, take this moment to introduce Michelle McMurtry to the City Council. This is her first presentation to this group. Michelle leads up some of our administrative and communication and operational efforts in the Community Development Department. She has a very busy job of keeping all of those different divisions, working together. And, we really take pride in providing stretch opportunities for our staff. So we wanted to give Michelle a warm welcome. I think you'll be pleased with this item because it's one of the tangible outcomes from your investment in our land management system. So with that, I will turn it over to Michelle.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor McNamee and members of the council. The request before you tonight is to amend the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code by repealing Chapter 12 of Title 8 regarding residential resale requirements. Staff's recommendation is to find that this Thousand Oaks Municipal Code amendment is exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to California Government Code Section 15061B3, and to read ordinance in title only, waive further reading, and if no objection, introduce ordinance to approve MCA 2023-70002, amending the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code by repealing Chapter 12 of Title 8 and hold the chapter placement for future use. The City of Thousand Oaks Municipal Code requires residential sellers to provide the buyers with a report of residential building records for the property to assure that buyers are aware of any construction that may have been accomplished without permits and inspection. As the city transitions to reliance on its new land management system, TO24, this information can be gathered online without burdening private parties with the cost and wait time of having staff generate the report for them. On August 10th, 1971, City Council adopted Ordinance Number 223NS, adding Chapter 12 to Title 8 of the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code relating to reports of residential building records. The ordinance required a fee to be paid and an application to be submitted to initiate a review and a report of pertinent city records and an inspection of the premises to determine the accuracy of said records. This requirement was to be met prior to the sale or exchange of a residential property. In 1986, City Council adopted Ordinance Number 932NS, replacing Chapter 12 of Title 8 of the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code. The revised ordinance continued to require a report of records, but removed the mandatory inspection requirement, allowing for voluntary on-site inspections for an additional fee. Pursuant to California Government Code Section 38780, the intent of Chapter 12 of Title 8 is to assure that the purchaser of a residential building within the city is given the opportunity to be furnished with a report of matters of city record pertaining to the authorized use, occupancy, and zoning classifications of real property prior to its sale or exchange. On November 14th, 2022, the city launched its new enhanced and integrated virtual land management service system, TO24. With this new self-service virtual system, the public may instantly access the information required in Chapter 12 of Title 8 via the portal at no charge and with no wait time. When the Report of Residential Building Records program came into existence, the only way for a homebuyer to find complete building records on a residence was through city staff, with a fee to be paid by the resident and with a wait time to receive the records. Now, with the introduction of the new virtual self-service system, TO24, these records are available for anyone to retrieve 24 hours a day, 7 days per week, and at no cost to the resident, saving the resident valuable time and money by removing unneeded fees on home transactions in this challenging housing market. On December 20th, 2022, staff met with representatives from the Conejo-Simi Moorpark Association of Realtors. As representatives of this entity, they expressed support of the repeal, identifying simplification of the real estate transaction process, as well as cost savings for residents as their basis of support. Staff's recommendation is to find that this Thousand Oaks Municipal Code amendment is exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to California Government Code Section 15061B3, and to read ordinance in title only, waive further reading, and if no objection, introduce ordinance to approve MCA 2023-70002, amending the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code by repealing Chapter 12 of Title 8 and hold the chapter placement for future use. This concludes my presentation. Staff is available for questions.
Thank you very much. Staff, council members, any questions for staff? Terrific. No questions? Let's go to, now we will have speakers. Mr. McDougall, this is deja vu all over again.
Seems like it.
Welcome.
Good evening.
You've
Good
got-
evening, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Council members, thank you, staff. I think basically I just have to speak to our support as the representative of the Conejo-Simi Moorpark Association of Realtors. We feel like this will streamline the transaction process while certainly giving residents and potential buyers the access to the information they need to make an educated decision when it comes to such an important purchase as a home. So thank you very much to the staff, and I'm here if you have any questions for me about this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your service.
Staff, any comments? We good? All right.
No comments, thank you.
Let me close the public hearing and council. Questions, any discussion we have on this issue? Mr. Adam?
Well, thank you, Mayor. Well, our land management system is starting to pay off already, which I'm glad to see. We go from $82 to free, can't beat that, and we go from 10 days to gather information to instantly. So those are two big steps, I think, and I would like, with that in mind, like to move 11A.
Mr. Taylor, any comments?
There's not much to say other than great work. Yeah, this is good.
I would like to share the following, is that Wall Street Journal article a few years back pointed out that the cost of housing, 27% of it is due to government. And every second you delay on getting a project to move forward drives up the price of that project, that in turn drives up the price of housing. And by going over to this management system, eliminates and reduces down a lot of the wait time in a development project, making projects less expensive in the city. And as Councilmember Adam pointed out, not only is it the fee to access that information, but also the time delay of waiting 10 days or longer to obtain that information. So I think this is a giant step to help reduce the cost of government and driving up the cost of housing here in Thousand Oaks. That's where we need to be in making government more efficient. Mr. Newman, any comments? We good?
No comments, Mr. Mayor, other than I'll support this measure. Thank you.
All righty, so let's have a motion on the floor. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Newman?
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adam?
Yes.
And Mayor McNamee?
Yes.
And that motion passes 4-0 with Councilmember Engler absent. And your ordinance title is Ordinance Repealing Chapter 12 of Title 8 of the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code relating to reports of residential records, MCA 2023-70002.
Thank you. And you're to open up a hearing, is that correct?
Correct. Hearing advertised as required by law is open to consider agenda item 11B, proposed 27-unit apartment complex expansion. Speakers are requested to state their name for the record. 5 individuals have presented speaker cards, and pursuant to council standards, each speaker will have 5 minutes.
Thank you. And we have Mr. Calvin Parker, Community Development Director, and staff, Stephen Kearns, to make a presentation. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nazar Slim, Senior Planner from the Department, will lead the presentation. Myself, Chief Assistant City Attorney Patrick, and Steve Kearns are also here to answer questions this evening. Nazar?
Thank you, council members, city staff, and members of the public. The presentation before you is a request to expand the existing Arroyo Villa Apartments onto an adjacent vacant lot located at Rancho Conejo Boulevard on a parcel just north of 1300 Rancho Conejo Boulevard. Tonight, staff would recommend that council accept the Planning Commission recommendation to adopt negative declaration ND 2021-70893 in accordance with California Environmental Quality Act and adopt a resolution approving the following: General Plan Amendment LU 2020-726, Development Agreement 2022-70511, Residential Plan Development Permit 2021-70019, Specific Plan Amendment SPA 2020-70027, and finally, Protected Tree Permit 2022-70626. Just a brief background, the site itself is 157 acres. As I mentioned, it's a parcel located on Rancho Conejo Boulevard and Corporate Center Drive, just where that T intersection is, and it's also adjacent and north of 1300 Rancho Conejo. It's currently undeveloped and has been previously graded. The topography is relatively flat and unimproved. It sits approximately level with Conejo Boulevard. And again, a brief history here. Back in January 28th, 2020, the General Plan Amendment was initiated to 726 by City Council. That allowed for the Measure E units 47 to be allocated to this project. Only 27 of those units, however, are being used for the project. Following that, in May, the formal submittals started coming in. And on February 27th of this year, we did have the Planning Commission hearing, and that also voted, and that was, the vote was to recommend approval, sorry. A little bit about the project process itself. The pre-screen procedure, City Council did approve the concept back in January 2020. And as I said, formal applications did come in May. All prerequisites having been satisfied, the Planning Commission having made recommendation of approval to the City Council. This is some of the surrounding land uses. As you can see, the site located here is surrounded by industrial uses to the west and south, with some residential uses to the north, and of course the Arroyo Villa Apartments here to the north, just adjacent to the site. In summation, the project is three two-story apartment buildings totaling 27 units with 51 total parking spaces, which meets the standards for parking code, and also a parcel merger with the adjacent apartments to the north, and that's going to be a conditional requirement. The architecture is of Mediterranean revival style. Some of the materials include smooth texture plaster, enhanced trim around the openings. It's two levels of living area with tuck-under parking at the back. This is the front elevation that you're looking at, front or west elevation, and directly on Conejo Rancho Boulevard. The unit mix, which does contribute to arena numbers, is going to be 11 one-bedroom units, 12 two-bedroom units, 4 three-bedroom units. That totals 27 units. Here's a table again, just showing some of our arena requirements and where we're at. In this case, these are going to be, or they're going to propose 4 affordable units. The affordability is in the moderate category, and it does fill up that the category that you see here. We're in a deficit of 522. Again, just kind of a little bit more about the project itself. There are private usable open spaces. I'm just going to kind of share what they are by unit type. So we've got Well, again, 11 one-bedrooms, 12 two-bedrooms, and 4 three-bedrooms. The 3 bedrooms do have 77 square feet dedicated for the private usable space. And the 2-bedroom have anywhere from 66 to 70. And the 1-bedrooms have 66 square feet. We should note that the 66 square foot minimum does fall below the 100 square foot minimum, which is Thousand Oaks Municipal Code standard. In addition, the 7-foot minimum dimension is not being met by just 1 foot. So the minimum dimension here that they're proposing is 6 foot. With that, there are 2 waivers being requested. This is just to give you an idea of what these private open spaces would look like. As you can see, the minimum dimension here being 7 feet 7 inches by 10 feet is still a very usable space. It does have room for some outdoor furniture, and one can enjoy the space as it's designed. These would be more or less the ground unit patios. And this diagram here shows you what the balcony may look like. Again, there is a smaller dimension of 6 foot 6 inches, down again from 7 feet, 6 inches only, and with the 10-foot dimension there to give us the 66 square feet. It should also be noted that staff has seen a trend with these kind of getting smaller. As the living units themselves get smaller, it follows reason that proportionally speaking, these open spaces do get smaller, and we've approved quite a few of these along with other residential projects. Or I should say, we approved these waivers along with other residential projects. To help kind of offset this waiver, there are some on-site amenities. It does include a barbecue and picnic area. In addition, since this is going to be an expansion of an existing apartment complex, they are going to be able to, or this project will be able to share the existing amenities such as the pool area, fitness center, and other features. There's also, I think, a children's play area as well to the north, and that'll be part of this project eventually. As I mentioned, parking is parked at Thousand Oaks code standards. The plans that you have may show 3 additional spaces. It should be noted those 3 additional spaces are for the purposes of filling in spaces that would be lost on the adjacent parcel to have that connection. So there's going to be 3 spaces on the adjacent parcels that will actually be removed because they're going to have a roadway to come through or a drive aisle. And so those 3 additional spaces will go to replace that. In the end, both the project will be parked at the standard. This is just to talk a little bit about the protected trees on site. These are actually off-site, but so I apologize for that title. There is an oak tree just north, which is going to be part of the project once the parcels are merged. And there are 2 sycamore trees just located I believe to the east, and those are on private property. They were considered as part of the project because the actions or the improvements made by the project themselves would impact these trees, and so we wanted to be careful that it was done in a way not to harm the trees. And here's a kind of a diagram of what they are. Like I mentioned, these 2 trees are off-site. This is off-site, but of course it will be part of the site once these 2 parcels are merged. For community benefits, I've already mentioned that there are going to be 4 affordable units. They are in the moderate income range category. And in case we don't know what that is, that's 120% of the Ventura County median income. That represents 15% of the 27 base units, which leaves 23 market rate units. Also, as part of the recommended approval, we do have an amendment to the specific Plan 07. And then what that's going to do is I just want to bring it a little closer. It does change the existing U, which has I believe, an industrial use now, to employment park, to E, apartments. And this kind of just shows you on the chart there where that is. And so E, and that would just be it would be a planned unit E, and that would allow the apartments. So then, again, just to reiterate, staff would recommend that Council accept the Planning Commission recommendation to approve the project and adopt, accept, and approve as appropriate the applications, agreements, CEQA clearance, DA ordinance, and resolutions stated at the beginning of the presentation and in reference to the attachments, based on the staff report findings and subject to the conditions of approval in the attached resolution. That's attachment number 6. This concludes the presentation. Staff is available for questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions for staff? Mr. Newman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Slim, for your presentation. You mentioned that there was an initial allocation of 47 units out of Measure E, and that this project is 27 units. So I presume that means that the unused 20 units go back in the Measure E bank. Is that correct?
That is correct. When we do Measure E units, they are based on the gross square footage of the parcel. In this case, 1.75 would have yielded 47 units. In most cases, a project is not able to utilize the full count of the assessed units, so they do go back, whatever's not used.
If I could just jump in and augment Mr. Slim's comments. The Measure E allocation is actually based on the acreage of the parcel times the maximum density for that parcel. In this case, it was 1.57 acres times 30 acres. The allocation itself that comes out of the Measure E capacity is the 47 units. And the balance, the unused units, do not get returned. So those are used as part of the project site. So it's a formula based on the actual land use designation on the general plan map, which is a direct reflection of the 1996 baseline.
All right, thanks very much for that. My final two questions I'll ask of the applicant as well. As you noted, there are 4 affordable units in this project. They are affordable. They are at the top end of the affordability spectrum, being moderate income units. I'm wondering, during negotiations for this project, if city asked either A, for more affordable units and or more different types of income classes to be allocated in this as part of this project.
Good evening, Mayor and council members, and good evening, Councilmember Newman. The answer to your question is yes, there was a negotiation that included a lot of different back and forth. This project and this agreement took I would say a few months to actually finalize. Ultimately, as you know, Councilmember Newman, but for the public, when you deal with a development agreement, you are certainly looking on a case-by-case basis because there are various factors that go into play when you're negotiating and looking at a project. In this case, we actually had a very small project. We felt that at the end of the day, with the fact that they were adding this apartment complex as 27 units to a much larger complex and going to benefit and include a connection to that other project, we felt that looking at all those circumstances and the fact that the development agreement is going to set a timeline for this thing to be built, we felt that at the end we could accept their request for moderate. And again, as you noted, for moderate are still affordable and something that we certainly need as part of our calculations for RHNA.
Thank you, Mr. Heer. My final question, same thing, but with regard to a pathway to units to buy or rent to buy. Was there any discussion of that as part of the negotiations for this project?
There was not.
Very good. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Any other questions from council? All right, we'll open up to speakers. And first up, we have on Zoom, Mr. Jackson Piper. One moment. Actually, yes. Let's do the applicant first, yes. So we have Doug Griffith, Vice President, Development of Chappelle Properties. Please step up to the podium. You have 15 minutes. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, council members, and staff. My name is Doug Griffith. I live in Santa Monica, California. And I thought I would give just a little bit of history on Chappelle as well as the project. So we built Arroyo Villas back in, I believe it was about 1995. And our business model is to hold all of our properties in perpetuity. Still a family-owned company. We don't plan to build, sell as soon as we're done. And I think that makes us look at the projects a little differently, design them differently, spend money differently. We worked with staff for, gosh, I think it's quite a few years now at this point on this project. And initially, we had come in and said, we think the most natural project for this site is an extension of the Arroyo, existing Arroyo apartments. Through conversations, staff actually asked us to look at a much denser, bigger project with the goal of providing more affordable housing. We said, okay, we can look at that, but we'd already done some plans. So we went back to the drawing board, spent a bunch of money to create more plans that had more units so we could provide the community with more affordable housing. But that meant we had to go to 3 stories. Through more conversations, I think it was decided that was probably too big for the community, too high, knowing, and we knew all along, on the back side of the property are single-family homes. And generally speaking, when we're designing a project to be next to single-family homes, we want it to be 2-story, because that kind of fits in with the scale of a single-family home. So we redesigned again to come back to a 2-story project. We couldn't go back to the original one because another request that was made of us was to orient our units on Rancho Conejo to provide as nice of a pedestrian experience as possible. And therefore, we had to move the driveway. So that's what led to moving the driveway to come off of from the original Arroyo apartment community and the 3 parking spots that was mentioned that we'll lose. So we have found space on the new parcel for the 3 parking spots, and we will have the new building oriented to Rancho Conejo. So that's a lot of the time. We spent quite a bit of money on design work, kind of at the request of the various changes. We think we're at a project that, through working with staff is something that looks good. It's a modern kind of interpretation of the Arroyo Villas. We are lucky the original apartments have a lot of amenity space. There's great grassy areas for kids to play on. We have 2 different pools. We've recently renovated both pool areas. So we think it's a nice community. One of the things we do look at when we're designing new projects is how do we facilitate community? And so one of the things you notice was there is slightly smaller private open space, but what we do is we try and create the community space that's for the whole community. So for example, barbecue areas, seating areas, pool area, things like that. There's a few other effects to that. One is a lot of big balconies tend to become big storage areas, which no one really likes. People put big barbecues out there, which have become illegal and fire problems and what have you. So we want to encourage people to come use our barbecues that we put out. We put very nice, expensive barbecues out and make really nice seating areas. And so what we have seen is that generally speaking, people don't need as big of private open space. And if they do, it just becomes a place to store things. The other piece to that was by putting the building on Rancho Conejo Boulevard, the space, the way that the drive aisles all laid out, the way we had to orient the buildings, we couldn't come forward anymore without going into a setback and asking for relief on that. So we felt like what the markets told us is we don't need as much private open space, and we felt like to create the pedestrian feeling on Rancho Conejo that was the best compromise, I guess you could say. And yeah, I think Assistant City Attorney characterized it well. We had quite a few discussions on the affordable housing component. We would have been happy to provide more affordable housing had we had a bigger project. When you have a project that takes years to get to this point, we've already spent a lot more money than we ever thought we would spend just to get to today. Unfortunately, with interest rates the way they are, even building what we've proposed looks challenging. I don't know, we're going to have to evaluate that, and costs haven't come down, and basically interest rates have doubled. So we have some challenges there. If we were a year and a half ago and we had a bigger project, absolutely, we could do more affordable housing. So I think the other piece was that the Arroyo Villas original development agreement had that affordable housing was at moderate level. So the whole concept all along was to create an extension of that project. And with that, I'm here for any other questions you might have, and thank you all for your help.
Thank you. Council members, any questions for Mr. Griffith? Mr. Newman, any? Nope, we're good. I have a few. From what I'm hearing from you,
Mr. Mayor, I did have some as well, but please go ahead.
To make it easy, I'll go forward, but thank you. Mr. Newman, to make it easy for me, could you use your hands up on the Zoom there? There's an icon you could do in the future.
I did, sir.
Oh, there it is. I see it. It blends in with your background. Very good. Thank you, sir. I'll come back to you in just a moment. Thank you. I have a question for you regarding the challenge right now of building in this environment. From what I'm hearing from you is that as we've got higher interest rates, not only our supplies like lumber and labor and so forth have gone up, but also the cost of doing the construction with the interest rates to actually move forward. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what is causing that to occur in the economy? Because under the President Obama and Trump administrations, interest rates were low. What has caused this to occur recently?
Well, I'm not an economist, so I really
and you
shouldn't
don't
give an
even
opinion
play one on TV. I got you.
I mean, we're having inflation. Basically, the cost for us to build projects is up, I don't know, 20, 30% in the last couple of years. And a huge component of inflation, as it's measured by the Fed, is the cost to either rent or buy housing. So that's gone up, caused the Fed to raise interest rates. That's my understanding, but I'm not an economist, so.
And when do you anticipate it to come to a price point that makes sense to construct it in Thousand Oaks?
That's a very good question.
Your crystal ball is not as good as anyone else. Is that what I'm hearing?
Nope.
Right.
Sorry.
Mr. Newman, thank you. I'll look a little more closely for the hand up, and I appreciate your patience. Please, Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that. And thank you, sir, for your explanation of the challenges and trade-offs that you and your willingness to work with the city. For a non-economist, I thought you did a pretty good job of explaining the economic challenges you face in getting this to work out. But I do want to explore a little more the community development aspects of what you were saying. Actually two of the biggest needs we have with housing in our community is twofold. Number one, by far, our biggest unmet need is in the low income category, not in the moderate category. We certainly need housing at all income levels, including moderate. So I don't want to belittle what you've done here. I don't want to ignore that that's wholly consistent with the existing apartments, but we do have this much greater need by far in the low income category. And as well, we build almost nothing either to buy outright or rent to buy. So as a general question, I'm asking what is it that the city should be doing or that you can be doing to address those two needs, because those are our great unmet needs?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think, Mr. Mayor, you actually touched on it earlier, that the longer it takes a developer to develop, the greater the cost to develop. And the greater the cost to develop, the harder it is to provide lower affordable housing. This project we've been working on for 4-ish years for 27 units. That time is money, and that's a huge challenge for us. There is economies of scale. The bigger the project, the more you can absorb costs, because a kitchen costs the same, right? If I can build 100 kitchens and I can distribute the cost across everything, it helps. And the site costs, the infrastructure, all of that helps me to build a community with more lower affordable housing. Ultimately, it's more housing. In regards to the question on buy or rent to buy, I'm actually not aware of any. So our company's business models to build and hold forever. It's a family-held company, right? I think we've been in the community for 30-something years, built a number of the single-family homes, and plan to be here for a long time. So we actually have we don't have a business around selling units anymore. That was sold off maybe 6 years ago. So we only build for rent product at this point in time. I'm not actually aware of a program where you rent to buy. I haven't come across that in the industry, in the economy, in the industry. So it's an interesting question, and I don't know the answer to that. But we at this point only build for rent product. Yeah.
Mr. Newman, any other questions?
That's all. Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Taylor.
Okay, I have a question I'm trying to stay away from the crystal ball, but financing. What are you guys planning on doing for financing, knowing that, at least for developers right now, the risk is the refi risk on the back end and not knowing where interest rates are going to land? What's your guys' plan for that right now?
It's a good question. We typically, we have one particular bank we've been borrowing from for 70 years. And again, it helps to be a family-held company that's been in business for a really long time. This is a small enough project that, given what's happened with interest rates, we may not go get another loan. But we're having a lot of conversations about how do we make this work. I mean, this parcel has sat for 30 years, and we're interested in making it something. So I don't actually have an answer to that. We're exploring all avenues of how we could make it work. Right. I know a lot of developers just won't even be able to get construction loans in today's environment with what's going on in the banking world. It's a huge challenge.
Is there a scenario where you wait this out and see where we land and then look at building at that point? There's a lot of people pencils down right now. We're looking at a lot of projects even in our area where, getting financing is tough right now. Bridge debt and construction debt brings on a whole new risk. That's also on the table, I imagine.
It's on the table. I would like to think that we can make it happen. I mean, we do have the benefit of having owned the land for 30 years. Right. And because it is an extension of the existing apartments, it's a different project than if I was to come and say, hey, we just bought a piece of land and want to start something from scratch. So we do have some advantages there. So I'm optimistic that I think we can make it work, but it's super challenging.
Right. Well, look, everyone in this room knows, everyone in our city knows there's demand for the product.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Question for you. There's a demand, as you mentioned, Mr. Taylor, the demand for housing in our community. Everyone from Los Angeles wants to live in this gem of a city called Thousand Oaks. My challenge is that it's taking, when I speak to developers, 5 to sometimes 6 years from the time they present the project to the time that they receive occupancy. And that, again, drives up the price because the delay. And in Florida, for example, they do it in 3 years. And yes, they have some different challenges in Florida than we do here. We've got Sacramento, and they tend to do a lot more in regulations and requirements that delay projects. Is there anything we as a city could do more efficiently? You do not have to commit to this right now. We can talk offline. But what can we do better here? Because we always want to seek efficiency with our city services. And our city staff is very open to listening to developers to make this a pleasant, efficient, quick process so that way we can keep prices down for our residents to rent your units. Any thoughts?
I enjoyed working with staff. I think it was a productive back and forth. It did take a long time, but I kind of understand it. We went down a path of trying to create more affordable housing and create a bigger project, and so in many ways I get it, but that did add time and cost. I'd be happy to talk about it offline.
Happy to hear your comments as well
Sure.
as city staff, because they all want to do a better job.
Yeah.
And I think we have a superb city staff, and they want to, again, be more efficient. Council members, any other questions? I do ask that you stand by because we're going to open up to public comment. You may have to answer some of those questions, so please, thank you. Staff, any responses to what has been presented so far? Actually, let's go to public comment next. First up, we have Jackson Piper. Jackson, on Zoom, you have 3 minutes, Mr. Actually, is it 3 minutes or 5? 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor McNamee and members of the City Council. My name is Jackson Piper. I live in unincorporated Newbury Park. I'm part of Ventura County YIMBY and also the Teal Livability Action Network. Have been a housing advocate for a number of years. I want to say that I appreciate all the work that's gone into this project and appreciate the efforts of the property owner to work with city staff and try and shape this project into something that can get built. So I hope that the city does not outright reject this project tonight. I hope it does get approved, and I appreciate the 4 units of moderate income housing. That being said, I have reservations about the process that created the project we see here today. And as you heard earlier, this is a site that's 1.57 acres. It's being zoned for housing that's between 15 and 30 units per acre, which creates the potential for 47 units of housing on this site at the baseline, which is significantly more than what this project is proposing. That's also where the Measure E allocation came from, I should mention. My concern is that over the course of this project, at some point it was potentially much larger than what's proposed today and potentially included a lot more affordable units, well, significantly more affordable units than the 4 that are being offered and possibly at deeper affordability levels. For the city to ask for a reduction in the size of the project when we've been dealing with a decades-old developing housing crisis, homelessness crisis, all the things that are tied to it. When Thousand Oaks doesn't have much land available to actually build on, just seems wrong to me. And there are a whole host of impacts to the environment and to the economic welfare of the community, the social well-being of the community, so many other impacts that result from decisions like this where, the city says, well, that's going to be too controversial, that's going to be too tall, why don't you pare it down a bit? And then we lose out on the community benefits like more affordable units because the city is concerned about possibly upsetting nearby single-family home residents, which, yes, I understand wanting to keep your views. This view in particular, I'm not sure exactly what would be preserved by keeping it at 2 stories as opposed to 3. But that trade-off has been made ad nauseum throughout California, throughout our cities, even just in Thousand Oaks, for those decades that this housing crisis has been building and is in fact a major contributor to it. We keep reducing projects to the point where they're just not viable anymore to produce affordable housing. And while these projects alone might not be enough to actually solve the whole affordability problem, without them, we're never going to reach that point where we actually have abundant affordable housing for everyone that needs it. So going forward, I really hope city staff does not discourage developers and property owners from pursuing the maximum potential of their properties to produce affordable housing or housing of any kind that can potentially siphon out, market rate payers that would otherwise take up, more affordable housing stock. And I do want to point out, with the density bonus, the site like this could produce, let's see, it was, I think, 23 additional units beyond that 47. If it produced a 11 of the baseline units as low-income affordable, or 7 of the baseline units as very low-income affordable. I think that's important to keep in mind that
15
yes,
seconds.
a project like that would be taller, it would be denser. That's not a bad thing. It's something we should really consider as a valuable asset to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Piper. Next up, we have Faith Grant on Zoom. Faith?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, and staff. My name is Faith Grant, and I am a member of the Conejo Climate Coalition, a group of Thousand Oaks residents engaged in pursuing climate solutions in the Conejo Valley. Item 11B is a positive action that adds more housing stock in Thousand Oaks. City Council is well aware of the need for affordable housing and housing that is also situated in locations that'll expedite the use of public transit. This development meets both needs. What will further enhance this development is the use of sustainable building features, such as building electrification, i.e. no gas infrastructure, rooftop solar and battery storage, garage EV chargers, and native trees and gardens. City Council has supported these sustainable features in the very recent T.O. Ranch and Baxter property developments. Many of these features reduce construction costs and also fossil fuel emissions, the primary drivers of our climate crises. Let's continue on this positive trajectory and encourage Chappelle Properties to also incorporate these climate-friendly, sustainable building features in this project. To that end, Conejo Climate Coalition extends an invitation to meet with Mr. Griffith and share sustainable building ideas, as CCC did with the developers of the Baxter and T.O. Ranch properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kat Selm. Kat, you're on.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm here on behalf of the Conejo Climate Coalition, a group of community members that's engaged in pursuing climate solutions in the Conejo Valley. We desperately need housing, especially housing that's affordable, walkable, energy efficient, and healthy. I'm happy to see that this is an infill project that will add more housing stock and is close to transit. Those are all great things. I would also encourage the city and the developers that want to build here to future-proof their projects and consider the health impacts of fossil gas by building these units all electric and with sustainable features. IMT's project in the T.O. Ranch community at the former Kmart property is a perfect example of developers creating a safer, healthier living space for Thousand Oaks residents. Gas infrastructure locks in emissions for decades to come, even as our grid greens more and more each year. The other thing T.O. Ranch did was include many affordable units. The community is begging you for more affordable housing. Just last week, more than a dozen organizations in the community organized a workshop on affordable housing with nearly 100 community members in attendance. One of the things you heard tonight is that more dense projects can pencil out easier to include more affordable units. 3 stories versus 2 was the difference in several lower income units or not. In the future, I'd like to see the council and the community get what they want out of housing projects that are healthy, affordable, and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Tim McDougall.
Good evening once again, Mayor, council members, staff, members of the public. I would just like to speak out in favor of this housing project in particular. Why I am a big proponent of having a path to ownership. That's not always the case, much as my case was when I moved here 23 years ago to Newberry Park. I didn't have an option just to move into a home, so I chose Arroyo Villa as the place that we would camp out for about 8 months until we could get a feel for the area, and here we are. So I would like to thank you for bringing this project forth. And I would like to ask that the City Council please consider the Planning Commission's recommendation to move forward with this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have Danielle Borgia on Zoom. Danielle?
Good evening, Mayor McNamee and council members again. I just wanted to share our support from the Chamber of Commerce for this project. It sounds to me like there's been a lot of back and forth amongst the city as well as the developer. And while this is a smaller project, every unit of housing is so critical to our business community and our quality of life. This project location is especially important as the city invests in infrastructure improvements with sidewalks in that area, as well as a substantial amount of job growth within our biotech. And so I just want to share our board support from the Chamber of Commerce and hope you will move forward with supporting this project tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff, any responses to the public comments?
No, sir.
Mayor, if I may, I just want to make one point of clarification just in terms of project design. Staff worked with the applicant to create a design that was appropriate for a transition site from single-family residential to the multifamily residential adjacent to it. The design in and of itself is reflective of the relationship between the new project that's going in, the existing project that's there, and the single-family neighborhood that it backs up to. So as a matter of design and transition, that was reflective in the project sort of size there, and not necessarily a clear indication that a density was reduced. It was simply matching what was there and creating compatibility amongst the mix of uses in the area.
Council member, any questions for staff? Very good. Let me move on to applicant. Do you have any rebuttals, anything you'd like to comment here? Good? Thank you, sir. All righty. Let me close the public hearing. And council, discussion. Any comments? Mr. Adam.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Well, as Kat Selm said, this is a classic infill project. We're way beyond expanding the city outward into our open space and creating more car trips and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're looking for sites where we can place housing within our city, and this accomplishes just that. You know, every project's different and every site is different. The Kmart project came up. That's in a commercial area, and we approved over 400 units with 54 affordable units as part of that project. This is a lot different. You know, it's an acre and a half. It's in an existing single-family home neighborhood. And if you're going to get affordability, the Kmart project has 3 and 4 stories attached to it. As the gentleman from Chappelle said, you would have to add a story, go up to 3, and you'd have to increase the density. Height and density allows more affordability. And that does work in some sites, as the Kmart site. It worked beautifully there. This site's a little different, and I appreciate you coming forward with something that is compatible with the neighborhood, but does give us 23 market rate units and 4 affordable units. I think it fits in there perfectly. And just as an editorial comment, as far as for ownership affordability, that's you know, we all want to be able to buy something that's affordable. It's a lot easier said than done. With land costs as high as they are in the city of Thousand Oaks, the council embarked on a project on the Hillcrest Drive, but to keep the cost down, we had to buy the land, the city, for $10 million, which I think is a great investment, by the way. But that was enough to lower the cost to make it affordable. And we'll probably get 70 affordable for-sale condos out of that project. But to simply just state we need more affordable for-sale housing is oversimplifying the situation. It takes a concerted effort with money behind it to lower those land costs to make that happen. And I think the city's done wonders in accomplishing that. I don't know too many cities that have been able to purchase land and make affordable housing for sale to their citizens. So with that, Appreciate your presentation. I think this is a good project. Thank you for working with staff on it. Thank you, staff, for spending all this time on some really necessary housing. And I think it fits in perfectly with Arroyo that's already there. So I will, in fact, move 11B.
Thank you. Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mostly agree with Councilmember Adams' comments. I don't recall suggesting that housing affordability, particularly when it comes to housing to buy, is simple. It is an incredibly complex topic and has a lot of components. I share the concerns that several of our speakers raised about if we're going to do infill projects, we need to take every opportunity we can where we can address the needs that our community actually has. I appreciate there are other concerns as well here. There's the financing environment that the applicant mentioned. There's compatibility with surroundings, as Mr. Parker mentioned. And I appreciate that staff has a difficult job in balancing all these interests. Well, I certainly would prefer a project that would offer more in the way of meeting these two great unmet needs. I will support this project. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments by council? Discussion? All righty. Let's do we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Adam. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Newman?
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adam?
Yes.
And Mayor McNamee?
Yes.
And that motion passes 4-0 with Councilmember Engler absent. And your ordinance title is Ordinance Approving a Development Agreement with Chappelle Properties Incorporated relating to the development of property located at Rancho Conejo Boulevard and Corporate Center Drive, APN 667-0-173-025, adjacent to and north of 1300 Rancho Conejo Boulevard, Thousand Oaks, California, Development Agreement 2022-70511 DAGR. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move to Jamie Boscarino, Director of Finance. Welcome, Ms. Boscarino. It's all yours. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor McNamee, council members. Tonight we're here to hold a study session on the proposed fiscal years 2023 through 2025 CIP budget. Also here tonight is Brent Sakayada, our budget officer, as well as staff from other departments. This action tonight is the second step in our fiscal year's 2023-25 biennial budget process. Staff has been diligently working on our budget and the CIP in specific since October 2022. The CIP budget was presented to the Capital Facilities Committee last Thursday on March 30th. Staff also presented the proposed CIP budget to the Planning Commission last night. Following the presentation at Planning Commission, the Commission adopted a resolution finding that the proposed CIP budget for fiscal years 2023 through 2025 is in conformance with the Thousand Oaks General Plan. The CIP will return on June 6th for public hearing adoption. As we have done the past several budget cycles, we once again had a robust community engagement effort through our Your City, Your Priorities program. This includes a dedicated budget website, tobudget.org, meetings with the public at community events, a social media presence, presenting our budget process to both the Youth Commission and Council on Aging, and a short survey for the public to be able to take. For the first time this cycle, we also have the site available in Spanish as well. The CIP budget presents a 5-year CIP plan. This is a strategic way to focus on long-term needs and requirements and gives the staff the ability to proactively plan now for any potential funding challenges in the future. There are many CIP projects that can take more than 2 years to complete, so having a 5-year plan also helps to plan staffing resources. Projects can be multi-funded. A traffic and transportation project, for example, may come from a combination of grant funding, gas tax funds, developer fee funds. The proposed CIP budget includes a total of $126.9 million in overall budget and 152 projects. The proposed CIP budget manual is broken into 3 main sections. The summary section includes a 5-year summary by project category, 5-year summary by fund, and the revenue summary. It also includes a deferred requirements summary. The next section is the projects by category sections. The categories include facilities, housing, landscape, streetscape, library, open space, stormwater, streets, transportation traffic, undergrounding, wastewater, and water. And the final section is the projects by fund section. This includes a page for each fund, a listing of the project proposed to be budgeted from that fund. The fund summary also includes the beginning capital reserves amount available for spending, how much will be carried over from existing projects, any required reserves, anticipated capital revenues over the next 5 years, and the ending balance in the fund after taking into consideration all proposed projects. The 2 indices in the back include a listing of projects by number and a listing of projects alphabetically by name. Each project states which City Council CIP priority it meets. The priorities were established by City Council in 2009 for guidance in prioritizing capital projects. The definitions were updated in 2015 to add City Council's top priorities to the definition for CIP priority number 1. In addition, all CIP projects that come before City Council during the year have the CIP priority listed in the staff report. City Council's last goal-setting meeting was May 10th, 2022, where the top 10 City Council priorities for this fiscal year 22-23 were established. This proposed CIP draft incorporates those City Council priorities. Some of the City Council priorities that have projects in the proposed CIP budget are listed on this slide. Projects addressing the priorities are either already in process or are newly proposed in this budget, including several new projects for environmental sustainability. In the projects by category section is where the actual detail for each proposed project in the 2 years is shown. 2 years, the outer 3 years do not have an individual project sheet because they're just planned in the future and they're not actually receiving budget adopted. There are no detail sheets for those projects, as I mentioned. The project detail sheets are where you can find a variety of information about the project, including the description of the project, justification for why the project is necessary, City Council goal it adheres to, consistency with the city's general plan, if there's any operations impact from completing the project, City Council CIP priority, as well as funding sources throughout the 5 years of the plan. The detail sheets include all the pertinent information one would need to find out about the project. As mentioned, there are 11 project categories which are listed in numerical order from the greatest total proposed budget to the least on this slide. The water category has the highest proposed budget of $29.6 million with an additional $11.5 million in carryover. Wastewater is second, as you can see, at $25.6 million. Those categories comprise some of the city's largest assets and also our oldest assets as well that require regular routine maintenance and improvements. The total estimated carryover in this proposed CIP budget is $50.8 million for existing projects. This graph highlights the funding sources for the proposed CIP budget. The bulk of the funding, as you saw on the previous slide, is coming from our water and wastewater funds. And then also gas tax funds have a significant amount of funding, of course, for our annual overlay and slurry program. Combined, there's approximately 60% of funding for the CIP budget between those 3 funding sources. This shows the 10-year historical comparison of the CIP budgets. You can see that the total budget amount and the total number of projects has increased over the past 10 years. Although this is the highest proposed total budget, the bulk of the increase is due to the water and wastewater categories, that total $55.2 million of the $126.9 million total budget. The city has adequate funds available in both of those funds, and the analysis at the back of the budget shows that both water and wastewater can sustain the projects for the next 2 years. This map highlights the location of the 152 CIP projects and how funds are being invested throughout all areas of the city, whether it be for streets, landscaping, water, wastewater, all of our projects. It shows locations of projects that are at an actual specific location, but certain projects like our overlay, which hit a variety of streets throughout the city, aren't highlighted on this. Projects are proposed in all sections of the city, including Newbury Park, Sunset Hills, downtown Thousand Oaks, and Westlake Village. The top 10 projects based on new budget in this proposed budget and carryover are presented in this table. 7 of the projects are existing projects and 3 are new projects. Pavement overlay is the largest project, as you can see, at $13.4 million. Now diving into more detail in the funds in this proposed CIP budget, the general fund is the city's discretionary funding source. It can be used for any project that the city wants. Funding capital projects out of the general fund is from our capital reserves that have already been set aside. Based on several years of general fund surpluses, there are adequate reserves available in the general fund to fund the proposed projects. Total proposed budget of $12.2 million with a carryover of $7.8 million is in this proposed CIP. Since the general fund is discretionary, it can fund a variety of projects. The general fund will often support capital projects that are necessary and/or priorities that don't have adequate funding elsewhere, including in our library and stormwater. The general fund is primarily responsible for maintenance and improvement of all of our general city facilities as well. Some of the project highlights from the general fund include electric vehicle charging stations and potential projects that may result from completion of the CIAP, including upgrading our compressed national gas station at our municipal service center and updating our city's storm drain system master plan. The city's library fund is mainly funded by property tax. If there's not adequate reserves in our library fund to fund our capital projects, the city's general fund will assist. Some of the project highlights include the solar system projects at both libraries, which came before council recently, as well as our remodel of both libraries to plan for the future and more modern use of our libraries. This graph has been shown many times at City Council, but it's always important to emphasize how important funding is to the city's maintenance of our streets and road system. The last pavement management plan study showed that the city needs to spend approximately $8 million annually to keep our city streets in our current pavement condition. Funding has varied, as you can see, throughout the years. The red portions are the funding that the city receives due to the passage of SB 1. And as you can see, without that additional revenue source, the city would be well short of funding our streets and roads. In addition, the green shows TDA funds, of which the city was able to get a carve out in legislation allowing the city to utilize our TDA funds for streets and roads as long as we fully meet our transit needs each year. In the past, the general fund has assisted in meeting our annual street requirements when we have been short of funding. Our gas tax funds are restricted only to streets and roads projects. We can't spend that money on anything else. Funding comes from both gas tax and the Transportation Development Act funds that I mentioned. Project highlights include, of course, our overlay and slurry and curb ramp program, which are fully funded this cycle, as well as sidewalk replacement. And we increased our sidewalk replacement project by 25% this cycle, increasing it from $400,000 to $500,000. Capital projects and developer fee funds are from impact fees charged to development projects to pay for their fair share of the public improvements that are required. The fees are restricted to specific projects to construct public facilities, including streets, sidewalks, and traffic signals. Project highlights include the widening of Agora Road at Westlake Boulevard intersection, as well as installation of a sidewalk along Moore Park Road between Kaye Intrar and Thousand Oaks High School, which will help provide access to the high school, the Thousand Oaks Community Center, and Acorn Acres. Our lighting and landscaping funds are primarily from the lighting and landscaping special assessments and property tax revenue. Projects are restricted to the assessment zone areas. The highlights of projects include necessary traffic signal upgrade improvement projects in order to maintain safety and reliability of our city's traffic signals and lighting, woodcrete fence replacements along Canaan Road and Westlake Boulevard, and landscaping improvements along Thousand Oaks Boulevard between Duesenberg and the county line. In our stormwater fund, we have many challenges and complexities to funding our stormwater programs. We are not unique in this. Municipalities throughout the state face limitations in creating a dedicated funding stream to manage the regulatory framework for stormwater, including meeting our requirements of the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, our NPDES permit, and total maximum daily load programs. Our stormwater program is partially funded by a county-wide stormwater assessment. However, that assessment has not been updated in many years because it requires a public vote put on by the county, and it's inadequate to meet our capital requirement needs, and it requires general fund support. Since increasing the assessment would require that vote, the county has chosen not to do so. Project highlights include the stormwater to sewer diversion project at Malibu Creek and the watershed management plan implementation project. We also have our state and federal grants fund. Staff regularly seeks out federal and state grant opportunities to fund projects, and they have been very successful in obtaining funding. Highlights of projects proposed include our battery energy storage at city facilities project, in which the city is hoping to get federal infrastructure funding for. Hillcrest Drive bike lanes and pedestrian improvements project, which will convert the outside lane 3 along Hillcrest Drive to a Class 4 bike lane between Lynn Road and Moore Park Road in both directions, as well as installation of a new sidewalk and curb ramps on the north side of Hillcrest Drive between Lynn Road and McLeod Avenue. Also, the design for the installation of separated Class 4 bike lanes in both north and southbound directions on Lynn Road between Gainsborough and Reno Road, and converting existing equestrian trail to Class 4 bike lanes on the west side of Lynn between Hillcrest and the northbound 101 on-ramp, as well as other various improvements with this project, such as sidewalks and crosswalks. Our water fund capital projects are funded through the capital portion of water rates. The largest project is the Los Robles Groundwater Utilization Project, which we are working with Los Virgenes Water District on. We're also proposing a battery energy storage facilities at various pump stations throughout the city, in which we also hope to receive federal infrastructure funding for. Replacing our older water meters in order to update our technology capabilities so that customers will have access to real-time information, and reservoir improvements at La Granada. Our wastewater fund is also funded by the capital portion of wastewater rates. Some of the major projects include the relining of wastewater pipes and maintenance holes, tertiary filters, rehabilitation at our Hill Canyon treatment plant, and then also electrical classification and compliance upgrades also at the plant. For our transit system, majority of funding is from grants and TDA projects. Some of the highlights include a transition of our bus and dial-a-ride vehicles to all electric, and then the necessary electrical vehicle charging infrastructure to make this transition possible. Other enterprise funds include our golf course fund and our solid waste funds. Our golf course proposed budget is for various improvements or maintenance that need to occur, as well as renovation of our maintenance facility at the golf course. The majority of our solid waste funding is for design and construction of a food recovery and storage facility, which is newly required for cities. As part of our existing $16 million in approved funding in our current CIP budget, we have approximately $3.4 million available for carryover for any other opportunities that may come up for homelessness and affordable housing projects to be funded by our Housing Trust Fund. The funds are restricted for certain purposes. In summary, our proposed fiscal years 2023 through 2025 CIP budget of $126.9 million is financially feasible across all of our funds. Staff spent a significant amount of time evaluating each fund and reviewing projects to ensure that the proposed budget is a prudent investment of city funds. We are a maintenance community with aging infrastructure that costs money to ensure that our infrastructure is maintained properly so as not to defer maintenance and thus increase our long-term costs. Staff believes this presents not only a sustainable budget, but one that significantly and strategically invests in the community by committing funds towards our maintenance, significantly investing in environmental sustainability projects, and funding future homelessness and affordable housing projects. I'd like to take a minute just to thank staff across the organization for their extensive work on the CIP budget. Of course, our budget officer, Brent Sakaida, and then especially staff from our Public Works Department, as they have the bulk of the projects in our CIP budget. So tonight's recommendations are to receive information on the proposed CIP budget, to schedule a public hearing for June 6, 2023, and to find that this action is not a project defined under CEQA. And with that, myself and other staff are available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Council members, any questions for staff on this? Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Boscarino. Appreciate your very clear explanation of a very complex topic. And kudos especially to you and staff for including an overview of this in Spanish as well. Good job. I just have a couple of questions about relatively small expenditures in this much larger budget. As you noted on page 6 of the report, the expenditures, the CIP that's expected a few years from now will be significantly larger than what we're looking at in the current budget cycle. I don't know the exact percentage, but it is a much larger expenditure. There are 2 engineering studies in the current cycle, and my question around both is whether we anticipate that there will be additional costs on top of what's already shown as a big bump coming out of these. And to give you the specifics, one is project 2527, which is the, the South Branch Arroyo floodplain improvement. There's a $300K expenditure for an engineering study there. And I'm wondering if that engineering study recommends upgrades, whether that cost is anticipated or whether there'd be additional public outlays on top of that. And then the same thing for the campus master plan. There is a $15 million expense shown in the out year, but there is currently a $500K outlay for an engineering study. And I'm wondering if we're anticipating construction costs to exceed 15, or it's 15 in one place or 20 million in another place. If we're looking to exceed that, possibly as a result of this engineering study or the other one.
Thank you, Councilmember Newman. I'll take the campus master plan question, and then I'll turn it over to Public Works staff for the floodplain one. So campus master plan, we have an MI project in the proposed budget and also a CI project. So the MI project is one that is already in existence, and that's where we've been funding sort of our conceptual and feasibility study and design for. So we do have continuation of that part of the project, sort of our feasibility and conceptual study. What ultimately would end up getting proposed and designed, obviously, is we are planning a multi-phased project. So we wouldn't be funding all of the construction at once for a campus master plan. It would be phased out. So you can see we do have a significant amount budgeted in the CIP project for construction for potentially the first phase of the campus master plan. We do anticipate the project costing more than we do have in those outer years in the budget, but since this is a phased project, we're just sort of having a placeholder in the outer years for the first phase, I guess you could say, of the campus master plan. But we do anticipate the total phasing of campus master plan, whatever ultimately is designed, to cost more than we have currently in the budget. We do have...
Right, so for just on the campus master plan, then if I understand correctly, you're saying the cost would ultimately exceed the $20 million that's given for fiscal year 26-27. Is that correct?
Yeah, we would anticipate that it would exceed that. We do currently have $30 million reserved in our general fund already for the campus master plan.
Okay.
And then somebody from Public Works, I don't know if somebody online or if somebody here wants to... Mr.
Hey,
Minkle?
Jamie, I'm going to take care of this one.
Our Public Works Director.
Yeah, sorry, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I am off-site tonight recovering from surgery, but I'm recovering. It's better. I'm not recovered, but I'm on the right track. To answer your question, yeah, it was just a knee replacement surgery, which I know many of you probably have friends that have been through that. But anyway, the answer to your question is yes. If, depending on the outcome of that study, there may be improvements that the city could take that might take some of the residents in that area out of the floodplain. So part of that study will be a cost-benefit analysis to find out the cost relative to the savings that our residents would feel if we feel we can get them out of the floodplain. That is actually also a joint project with the County of Ventura. The county also has residents that are in the floodplain out there. So we'll be studying this together, and potentially we could be coming back to council in the future once we have the results of that study.
Mr. Finley, thank you. You anticipated my follow-up question exactly. There's another line item, this is 2638 for watershed management plan, and it's given that that is funded, I think, if I'm reading it right, by county funds. So would any of those county funds apply to this?
The watershed management
Arroyo one?
No, those are actually different projects. The watershed management plan is actually the entire city of Thousand Oaks watershed that's going down Cayugas Creek. And that is really a future stormwater program that it'll be a requirement in our permit over time. And we don't know the outcome of that study. That study is currently going on. But we know in a year or two, we will know the outcome, and then we can plan accordingly for those projects.
Very good. Well, I wish you continued good healing. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. I have a few questions for you. I noticed there wasn't much activity in the Newberry Park area. Why is that?
I think with the map that we put up, we did show that there are several projects that are in the Newberry Park area. And of course, as I mentioned, our overlay and slurry projects, sidewalk projects that hit a lot of areas in the city that we don't necessarily have our design yet for, would more than likely also be included in the Newberry Park area. We just don't have the list of city streets yet or all the sidewalks we're hitting yet. So more than even just showed on the map would be also in Newberry Park.
Excellent. The library, I'm a very big proponent of a strong library system. An educated public is a great place to be for keeping crime down and giving people purpose in life. Where are the funds specifically going for in the library?
So for the library itself, we have a specific library fund that is funded by our property tax revenue. And so that property tax revenue typically is enough to cover all of the operating costs of our library. We do have a surplus in our library right now, so the CIP projects will be funded by that surplus, and then any additional funding that is needed will come from our general fund to fund any library projects.
Excellent, thank you. And my last question is that Councilmember Newman, Engler, and I myself spent a week in Washington, D.C. lobbying for grants to bring back for such projects as EV stations scattered throughout the city, so that way those that may be in apartment complexes that don't have EV stations to charge up their vehicles, City Hall, library, and so forth. So that way it's accessible to the public more so as we move over to more electric vehicles. The other one was the stormwater diversion, specifically the Malibu Creek. So that way, when there's a rain and the bacteria levels go up in the Malibu Creek, we're not dinged for increased bacteria levels, that we would capture that, treat it, send it over to Las Virgenes. Those were two of several grants that we were asking for from the federal government, specifically our U.S. senators and Congressman Julia Brownley. Is that figured into our calculations here that we're going to get those grants? Because we lobbied very hard, worked 12 and 14-hour days to ask for that money to come back in the form of grants to improve Thousand Oaks. Is that part of the calculations we have here, or is that just going to be, icing on the cake, as I can say the term?
We anticipate that we will receive federal grant funding through the infrastructure bill for projects like charging stations and our battery backup systems. So that is anticipated as part of the budget. If we don't receive the funding, we just have to take a little closer look at our funds at that point and see, can we still move it forward, maybe through general fund support, if it's battery backups at our water pump stations or something. But we do anticipate receiving the funding because there is quite a significant amount out there. And of course, you guys lobby hard for funding for the city as well.
And if not this year, we'll do it again next year. And I tell you, it was a tough 7 days of lobbying all the way through, and it was a good experience with my fellow council members. I think we got a lot accomplished. I think they would agree. Let's move on to any other questions by council members. No, we're good. All right, let's move forward to speakers. 3 minutes per speaker. We have on Zoom, actually, I'm not seeing anybody for
don't
this
have any
particular
speakers
item. Is
for
that crew, Madam Clerk?
That's
Very
correct.
good. So with that, staff, any responses to questions we've put forth to you? Very good. So that makes life easy. Council, let's move on to council discussion. Any discussion? Mr. Adam?
Thank you, Mayor. Good work, Jamie. Boy, I know this takes a lot of work. You and your staff did a great job. I really like the way you prioritized this capital improvement budget this year with an emphasis on sustainability, on the climate, and really some solid community benefits that we can offer. I mean, great stuff like bike lanes, like solar at the library, at the golf course, like electric buses, and the battery storage thing. That's very far thinking. So if we have a facility and we lose power, we'll have backup storage right there at the facility. Pavement overlay, we always have the best streets in the county, and now we will continue to do that. And the groundwater, we've talked about this many times, how we're going to pull groundwater from Los Robles Golf Course, treat it over there at Las Virgenes, send it back here. All really important things. I think you did a great job of prioritizing. And you may have noticed that our CIP budget's doubled in the last 6 or 7 years. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is a lot to do with your department and the way you handle things fiscally, and a lot to do with the council building the city from within. You mentioned we're a maintenance city now, we're not growing. Well, we're not expanding outward, but we are building from within, because this stuff doesn't come free. Somebody's got to pay for it. And you know who's paying for it? When the auto mall puts another dealership in or expands one that's already there. When our bioscience hub adds a couple of new businesses like Captiva or Atara. When 299 on Thousand Oaks Boulevard opens up and brings in 3 new restaurants and 140 units. When Tarantula Hill opens up across the street. These are all the improvements that help pay for the community benefits that our citizens want and deserve. So that's how we get what we need to keep everybody happy. So great job, and I will go ahead and move the, which number is it, Mayor?
We're at 12A.
12A.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, Mr. Newman, any other comments before we move? Very good. I just want to acknowledge also, I kind of left out a key person in our lobbying that we did in Washington last week with Councilmember Newman and Engler, was that our city lobbyist, Mina Leba, put together a tremendous program for us. She brought us up to speed on our issues and what we want to communicate to our legislators to bring money back to Thousand Oaks in the form of grants to accomplish some of those things that we've just discussed, as well as others. And so, Mina, my hat's off to you. It was a pleasure working with you. They were long days, and we got a lot accomplished, so thank you. With that, I'd like to ask for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Newman?
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adam?
Yes.
And Mayor McNamee?
Yes.
And that motion passes 4-0 with Councilmember Engler absent.
Excellent, thank you. We'll move on to Department Reports 13A, consideration of transition to district-based elections pursuant to the California Voter Rights Act. And with that, we're going to have a presentation by Mr. David Womack, Assistant City Attorney. Mr. Womack? Give you a few minutes to get set up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This is a bit of an unusual spot for me to be in, but if you'll bear with me, I'll try to get through this. I meet with you regularly when we meet in closed session, but this is my first time doing this in a regular meeting. With that, with me on the dais today is Mr. Douglas Johnson. Doug is the president of National Demographics Corporation. It's a consulting firm that specializes in the analysis of liability issues related to the California Voting Rights Act and demographic studies that are pertinent to what we're doing today. We're here today because on March 15th, just about 3 weeks ago, we received what we refer to as a demand letter. The demand letter basically puts the city on notice that a member of the community is protesting or challenging our at-large election system. The letter was drafted by Jason Dominguez, an attorney from the law office of Radcliffe Mays, and Mr. Dominguez stated that he represents Chase Rashid, a resident of the city of Thousand Oaks. Letter alleges that city's at-large method of electing its council members violates the California Voting Rights Act. At-large elections are considered unlawful if they impair the ability of protected class of voters to elect their candidates of choice or their ability to otherwise influence the outcome of elections. Plaintiffs are awarded their attorney's fees, costs of suit, and expert fees, which can be quite high when they prevail in these type of California Voting Rights Act litigation. The letter demands the city to transition to by-district elections or face litigation compelling such a transition. This type of demand letter is a conditioned precedent to the filing of a legal action and starts what we call the shot clock of a series of events that must occur within a very short period of time to avoid the type of costly litigation we have seen throughout the state. For a way of background, the at-large versus district-based elections, for purposes of clarification, at-large elections are when every voter throughout the entire city has the opportunity to elect all 5 members of the city council. District-based elections are, as the name implies, elections in which the city is divided into separate districts, each represented by 1 council member who resides within that district, who is elected exclusively by the voters of that district. The California Voting Rights Act was signed into law by Governor Gray Davis back in 2002. The act by design expands upon the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965 And it essentially makes it easier for groups in California to prove that their votes are being unlawfully diluted by at-large elections. Unlike the Federal Voting Rights Act, the California Voting Rights Act does not require plaintiffs to identify a specific geographic district where a minority is concentrated enough to establish a majority. The elimination of this requirement has made it significantly easier for minority voters to sue local governments and eliminate at-large elections. The act has resulted in the initiation of hundreds of lawsuits against counties, cities, school districts, park districts, and similar public government agencies, which incurred enormous costs of fees associated with those litigation efforts. In response, the California legislature amended the act back in 2016 by passing Assembly Bill 350, which added the safe harbor provisions in the act. These amendments, which took place in 2017, established the initial 45-day safe harbor period, the start of which is triggered by the receipt of a demand letter from a potential California Voting Rights Act plaintiff. During the initial 45-day safe harbor period, no lawsuit may be filed against the city, and if the city takes steps towards the transition to district-based elections during that period, the city cannot be sued for an additional 90 days after they make that legal declaration. In which case, the city would be, in this case, the city would be a resolution of intention. The deadlines that I mentioned are in this next slide. The proposed dates are shown above. These dates are all triggered off that March 15, 2023 demand letter we received. The initial 45-day period will expire on April 29, 2023. That's the deadline that we would have to adopt a resolution of intention and would begin the 90-day safe harbor period. Now, on April 29, that's not the day that we would propose this be done. April 25 would be the date that it would be done. April 29 is just the expiration of that shot clock. April 29, I believe, is on a Sunday, so it would have to be done before then. The next deadline or next series of events that we show in the table that you see here is between May and July, and in this time period, the first time period, we would be holding 2 public hearings. That's required under the election codes to have 2 public hearings within 30 days of each other to discuss the composition of the districts. The next item on this timeline is in that June and July time period. 2 additional public hearings have to be held within 45 days of each other. And this would also include a community workshop to discuss the district maps. All of this can be done within the time allotted. July 28 is the last date. That's when the 135 days total period would elapse. We would propose, or if the council directs us to move forward with this, we would have this completed by July 18. July 18 would be the second public hearing in that that June-July time period. It would be the second reading of the ordinance. The first district-based elections would be held in November 2024. Some of the primary considerations which have to be considered tonight are what happens or whether we want to continue our current practice, which is by far the most common practice of having our mayor elected annually by their fellow council members. This would allow for the creation of 5 separate districts with a council member elected by each district. Alternatively, we could decide, if we wanted to move in this direction, decide to have our mayor elected by the popular vote of the city to a 4-year term. This would require the creation of 4 separate districts with a council member elected by each district and a mayor elected citywide. Another item to consider is what happens when 2 or more incumbent council members are within the same district. In this type of scenario, that we've just got a couple of possibilities here. In the event that 2 or more members, incumbent council members, are in the same district, the 2024 incumbents could run against each other in that 2024 election, and it's the event that the 2026 incumbent I'm sorry, if the event that 2024, both incumbents are in the same district, they would run against each other in that 2024. One would be selected to represent that district, and the other would no longer be on the council. In the event that it's a 2024 incumbent and a 2026 incumbent, both could run in that 2024 election. And in the event that the incumbent, that's the 2024, he would be elected to that district. The other incumbent would remain on the council to serve out his at-large term until 2026. In the event that the 2026 incumbent would win that election, then he would forfeit the last 2 years of his current incumbency would go away, and he would be elected to a 4-year term, and his term would end in 2028. Of course, the easiest solution, one of the incumbents relocates to another district. Now, the process here and how we go about this is really up to us. The California Voting Rights Act does not give us a whole lot of direction other than the governing body shall give special consideration to the purposes of the act. Therefore, if there is a district which doesn't have a member or one of those would be one of the first elections that would be we'd want to have a council member appointed to. Conclusions and next steps. If I haven't made it clear already, the California Voting Rights Act establishes a very low threshold to challenges. In fact, we know of no other agency which has successfully been able to oppose one of these challenges. Once we submit this to questions, any questions related to that we'll have Mr. Johnson respond to as a depth of knowledge that is very thorough when it relates to this. City Council desires to make this type of transition under the safe harbor rules. It must finalize these steps within the short period of time that I've laid out for you. One of the first of which would be to return with a resolution of intention at the very next meeting and provide us direction on how we'd like to proceed if we move in that direction, whether we're going to a district-based mayor and the number of districts. Our recommendation is to consider this information presented in the staff report, any public testimony that might be here, and provide direction to the city attorney on whether to begin the process of transitioning to district-based elections, the number of districts to consider, and whether to bring back a resolution of intention to City Council at the next meeting. Also, the final item is to find that this action does not constitute a project as identified in the California Environmental Act. And we're here for any questions that you might have.
Thank you for the presentation. Council members, any questions? Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and staff. Thank you for your presentation. I'm sorry to sound like a broken record since this is the third time I've asked, counting the staff meeting, but I just want to be clear for the public's sake on the questions that are before us as distinct from questions that are not. Question number one, of course, is whether we as a council decide to proceed with moving toward districts. And then question 2/3 is the number of districts, if we keep them, and as a related question, whether we would elect a mayor at large or whether we would continue our current system of having 5 council members, but each would be in a different district. Does that accurately describe the questions before us tonight?
It does. One thing I would point out that whether or not we have an at-large mayor or continue our current practice, that kind of goes back into the number of districts that we have. So I didn't separate it out, but that's one of the questions that need to be considered and discussed tonight is if we continue with 5 districts, we would presume that that means we would continue with our practice of the fellow council members electing the mayor on an annual basis. Conversely, if we decided to go with a different number of districts, we would be considering a mayor that's elected at large.
Very good. Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Any other questions? Very good. Let's move to our speakers. And we have several here that have 3 minutes each. First up on Zoom, we have Sally Hibbets. Sally, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, I hope you can see me and you can hear me. Is that true?
We are listening.
Okay, I didn't know if you could hear me. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor McNamee and City Council members. My name is Sally Hibbets, and my family and I have been city residents since 1973. I applaud the city in taking up this agenda item, and tonight the council should expeditiously move towards furthering this process, which is democratically wise and more equitable than our current at-large system. I equally applaud Chase Rashid for taking up this issue and bringing our city into a more modern and people-oriented voting process. All I can say is it's about time. I often hear comments from this dais that Sacramento is forcing us to do whatever, or articulating a fear of big government taking over and creating negative impacts. Yes, the courts and Sacramento lawmakers perhaps are forcing this issue upon our city, but they have also provided you with a wonderful new tool, which actually will make our city more have our large city representation far smaller and thus more responsive. So this is your chance to actually bring small government to our community, and please don't waste it. We need a yes from you for smaller government. We need a yes vote tonight to help minimize the negative influence of special interest groups of all types. We also need a yes vote to help support potential candidates from all parts of this city and backgrounds. At-large voting was seen as workable in the small towns of the 19th century. Today, beyond the inherent bias of at-large voting, the challenge of campaigning across the entire city is compounded by many factors. First is the very high cost of running. Staff, communications, USPS mail, yes, we still need that, database management, etc. Number two, the burden of fundraising to run citywide. Number three, the need to contact voters and gain name recognition in a jurisdiction that is far larger than our partner agencies in our same area. And four, the added time away from work and family to campaign and raise funds, which can be particularly draining for our volunteer council members, as all of you know, I'm sure. With the CVUSD and CRPD already making district voting in their agencies a reality, it certainly does not come as any surprise that our city has also now been put on notice, so to speak. With these other two partner agencies having already gone through this process, the city can certainly take from their experiences and learn from them. Certainly, it would make sense to have similar maps and overlapping district lines, but we all know that is not an option.
Thank you.
However,
I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much.
okay, thank you very much.
Excellent. Next up, we have Valerie Aguilar Quintanilla on Zoom. Valerie, you're on.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Good evening, Thousand Oaks City Council members. My name is Valerie Aguilar, and I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks. I have lived in Thousand Oaks for the majority of my life. I have attended schools here. I graduated from high school here in 2020, and I'm a registered voter in Thousand Oaks. Today, I'm speaking in favor of the transition to district-based elections. District-based elections would provide council members with a clear constituency, give the public a voice, and ensure that everyone can be represented. District-based elections would provide representation for all 25,000 plus residents of Thousand Oaks. This would include more representation for our communities of color in Thousand Oaks, especially for our Latino and Hispanic community. In Census Tract 61.02, 63% of the population identifies as Hispanic or Latino. In areas that are considered West Lake Village and southern areas of Thousand Oaks, only 5 to 19% of the population identifies as Hispanic or Latino. Growing up as a member of a Latino household, I had become aware of the lack of representation within Thousand Oaks. I have witnessed many city council members and candidates over time not politically and socially engaging with our Latino and Hispanic community. Therefore, I have felt that our needs in this community have not been met to the fullest extent, as we had previously advocated for more equity within our city council. When personal statements were shared of the prejudice our community had faced within Thousand Oaks, we were met with backlash from both city council members and the public alike. This in itself is disheartening, as I had hoped to be voting in candidates that would address the needs of our communities and our constituents, regardless of their backgrounds. In addition, every other census tract in Thousand Oaks has a median age of over 38. So many young voters in Thousand Oaks are not being heard, despite having a future here in the community. Being such a large city with a clear array of differences across demographics, how can we ensure that every person is represented at the at-large model? How can we ensure that we have a comprehensive city council if we only have 5 members that are supposed to represent all 125,000 plus of us? Transitioning to district-based elections can amplify misrepresented communities like our communities of color and young voters. Transitioning to district-based elections can allow for more diversity within our city council with the needs of constituents that in the past have been overlooked. And district-based elections can allow comprehensive policies and reform from our local government that will make us all feel welcome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have on Zoom Nelson Buss. Nelson, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, City Council. I just want to say that I do support district-based elections. TO is roughly 5 times the size it was when it was founded. We rarely have had a member of City Council of a minority background. I can only think of one Hispanic council member in the 35 years I've lived here. I would also appreciate if you would consider making the mayorship an at-large and separate from the council itself. I think that an elected mayor would be a nice backstop for staffing issues that we can occasionally have. No negative reflection on our current city manager, who is absolutely amazing, but there have been times in our recent history where it would have been nice to have somebody else at the helm, so to speak, who was accountable to the population. And when that didn't happen, I think that the city found itself in a place where it wasn't sure how to respond. And I think that a mayor council setup would be more effective to deal with those kind of personnel issues, how the agenda is set for the city as a whole. And in listening to the conversations about rule changes at your previous meeting, it sounded to me like a number of the members of our current city council would be inclined to have a mayor who had a greater command of how the agenda is set and a different set of powers. And I think it would make more sense if that person was elected in a general election while council members were elected in individual districts that made them accountable to smaller segments of population. I hope that makes sense to everybody. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Next up in person, we have Chase Rashid. Chase, please step up to the podium. You have 3 minutes. And after Chase in person, we have Carol Kavney, if I'm close. Carol, please come on down and have a seat behind, and you'll be called up next. Mr. Rashid.
Okay, so thank you to the council. And I've actually been challenged by some in the community to present what is a benefit of council elections by district. And all I can say is my definition of benefit is a lot different than a lot of other people's because my background is different. I've lived in communities with at-large elections all my life, and I've lived in the areas where the people were and have been underrepresented. In Santa Barbara, I was young. I didn't realize it then, but now looking back, I can see how there was very much underrepresentation of minorities, lower income communities, all of that. And I step forth on this issue because I think it's time for this city to move forward. There are other cities in the county that have done it, even Ojai, which is the smallest city in this county. They moved forward with districts. And I recall something from a previous election that a council member said as a candidate. Council member Adam did mention the prospect of neighborhood councils by district which is different than electing city council by district, but I believe that showed that at least one leader at the helm of this council right now knows that there's a benefit of individual neighborhoods having individual representation now. There are very well-defined boundaries in this city. They're easy to see. You cross Lynn Road, you're in Newbury Park. You cross Duesenberg, you're in Westlake. Very easy to see. Very different demographics, very different income, all of that. So I say, let's move forward and be more progressive with democracy. There are a lot of people who don't like how much money goes into politics. If you have districts, that brings down the amount of money that would be needed for someone to run for a council. It would lower the amount needed for the candidate statement, which is right now it's very high. So I really would like to see this transition happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Carol CJ, as I know you, and we also have next up Sue Gunther. Sue, please come on over and have a seat behind, and you'll be the next speaker. CJ, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor McNamee, City Council members, staff, and citizens here in the room and those virtually. My name is CJ Keaveney. Last month, I celebrated my 32nd year of being a fortunate resident of Thousand Oaks. As a matter of fact, I live in Newbury Park. And at one point during that time period, there were 3 council members who lived in Newbury Park. That's good for someone like myself living in Newbury Park. However, I'm sure other parts of the city may have come out on the short end of the stick. That's why I'm here in favor of the motion. I think that it would greatly enhance the voting power of all citizens in Thousand Oaks if we go to a district-based election. And in addition, I'd like to point out the cautionary tale of a city not too far from here that tried to fight this, and they're now millions of dollars in debt through legal fees of trying to ward out this decision of having district-based election. I think that the taxpayers and the hard-earned grants money can be better spent for CIP projects as opposed to legal fees. I do agree with the recommendation of staff. However, I'd like to make one edit. There is a use of the word whether. In some cases, whether creates doubt or uncertainty. And so instead of using the whether, I would recommend that you say that the city attorney will begin to process the transition to district-based election and the number of districts to consider and bring back a resolution of intentions of transition to the city election. That creates certainty. And I think, to quote an old ad tagline, just do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Sue Gunther. Sue, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, and I would just like to say ditto to what has just been said by Carol Keaveney and also by Chase Rashid. I've known Chase for a number of years, and he's a very fine young man who is very civic-minded. All I can say is that our country was founded on the idea that of taxation without representation is tyranny. And we need the most representation possible in our national, state, and city government in order to create the greatest benefits of democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And that, according to my schedule here, is the last speaker. Staff, any responses to comments?
I would respond to one of the speakers that was suggesting the type of mayor system that we have. I think there was an impression, and it was probably my fault for not clarifying the type of mayor system that we would have. The mayor, even an at-large elected mayor, would have the exact same powers and authority as his fellow council members. I think the speaker was talking about a strong mayor type position that could exist in a charter city, but we are a general law city, and the type of consideration that we're asking the council to give us direction on is whether to have a at-large elected mayor, but that mayor would have the exact same power of his fellow council members. Any other things? Okay. I think that was all of our comments.
Thank you. City Attorney?
Nothing to add?
Any other staff? Council members, any questions of staff at this point? Okay, let's open for discussion. Council. Mr. Adam.
Well, Mayor, I thought maybe we could talk about the mayor business first, if that's okay with you.
That's just fine with me.
There you go. Thank you. You bring up a good point. An elected mayor would have no more authority or weight, whatever the word you want to use, than any of the other council members. And in fact, an elected mayor, even though that would be the case, could give off the perception to the public that somehow they had more power than the fellow council members. And that's something that I personally would want to avoid, frankly. The other problem with having an elected mayor is we would not be within the timeline for the safe harbor, would we? We'd have to.
That's correct. If the council decided to go in that direction, I don't believe we would be able to do it within the very tight timeline we'd have, because we would have to introduce another ordinance or change of our existing, is it our municipal code? We would have to amend the municipal code to do
Sticking to this timeline is important. And I would just say, too, as far as past practices, we've had a appointed mayor for 60 years, almost 59, actually, and it's worked quite well. And I'll say this as well. Conejo Rec and Park has 5 districts. Conejo Valley Unified School District has 5 districts. It seems to me that the city of Thousand Oaks should follow suit with 5 districts. So I would be opposed to an elected mayor, and I think we should continue to honor our past and go with an appointed mayor.
Very good. Mr. Newman. Mr. Newman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just trying to get my mouse to work there. I hate to disagree with my friend, Mr. Buss, who testified, not least because he's 6'5", but I do concur with Councilmember Adams' comments about just on the mayor topic. I too would oppose having an at-large mayor and then district council members for the reason that Councilmember Adams stated. There would be an erroneous perception on the public's part that the mayor somehow, that vote counted for more because it was at large while everyone else was at districts, and that just would not be the case. I can think of at least 4 other reasons why this might not be a good idea. One is, besides what the public perception is, there's also the perception inside that mayor's mind that what we would be doing is essentially we, the public, funding what is essentially a very expensive citywide beauty contest. And I don't really think the public interest would be well served by that. As well, that an elected mayor position, because of its prominence, might be perceived as a leapfrog position toward higher elective office, state or national level. And again, I don't think that serves the public interest of having all of our representatives well represented by people who live here and are going to serve here and stay here. So that too would be a negative outcome of having an elected mayor. There's also a really nice tradition we have on the council of our annual reorg meeting. And whatever your beliefs are, whatever background you have, everyone comes together once a year and has this very celebratory occasion where we rotate. We all come together, we all witness our council choose one of their own, and then that's the next person. And I went through this at a lower level twice. In 8 years on the Planning Commission, I served twice as chair. And I also served with many other chairs. And that was good for every commissioner. It got everyone involved in having to manage a meeting under sometimes contentious conditions. And it got other members of the panel who observe and maybe hopefully learn how to do that difficult job as well. But I think there's a real benefit in having that role rotate around the whatever panel it is, and that does serve a public interest. And then finally, there was mention made of our recent discussion about rules, and I have a slightly different recollection of that discussion in that I think the consensus on most things was that for major changes, the consensus was that that's something the council as a whole should decide. And again, for that reason, I think it would be best to retain that power at the council level. My one final comment is that I agree with public comments that have made. Anything that encourages, promotes, makes our government more accessible to all of our residents is something that I strongly favor. So I too will welcome this change. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. As the mayor, I'm going to lay down some options here on how we can clarify this for our wonderful city clerk so we have a clear motion here. And I'd like to suggest the following, if council members are okay with this. As council member Newman articulated earlier, we have two items here to look at. First item is, do we want to go into districts? Second item is, how does that district look? Is it one with 5 districts, or is it one with 4 districts and 1 mayor elected every 4 years? I'd like to suggest we do a straw poll, and then that will frame up the motion that one of you will bring forth. So I'd like to deal with the first one of, should we go over to districts? Councilman Taylor, should we go to districts or not?
Yes.
Mr. Adam?
Well, yeah, I think districts are going to make...
Just yes
no,
or
I
no?
got to say a sentence or two, Mayor.
Okay, go ahead.
I think...
God forbid.
Appreciate your attempt to keep things brief. It's good. That's what a mayor should do. I just would like to say I think districts are going to make running for office in Thousand Oaks simpler. They're going to make it cheaper, and they're going to involve a lot more people, especially from underrepresented areas, and maybe some young people too. Because after all, you're going to be running now in your extended neighborhood versus the entire city. So cheaper, simpler, better representation.
So
Yes.
the answer is yes. Okay, thank you.
In other words, yes.
I always enjoy the congeniality of the gentleman I have to work with here. Mr. Newman, do you want to go over to districts or not?
I have a policy of never arguing with Councilmember Adam when he's correct. So I would agree, and I would support a move toward districts.
Very good. All right, second is we have a choice between 5 districts or 4 districts and a mayor. I'm going to go through with the first one and just get a straw vote on that one. 5 districts, yes or no? Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Newman?
Yes, although I feel in some ways like we don't yet have enough information, not having talked with the demographer yet, to be able to answer that question. But if we do, I understand from the lawyers, we do need to come up with some number tonight, so 5 is as good a number as any.
Mr. Adam, I left the best for you.
Yeah, unequivocally 5 districts appointed, Mayor.
All righty. So the way I'm not going to make the motion, I'm going to ask one of my council members, is the way it should read is that Thousand Oaks is directing staff to move towards districts, and it be 5 districts. And would anyone like to make that motion? Mr. Taylor?
I'll make the motion to move 2 districts and it be 5 districts.
Is that clear enough for you, City Clerk? Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And
Yeah,
the
we got it,
obligatory find that the action is not subject to secret.
Thank you.
Go ahead and say it.
Ditto, like she said.
Find the action does not constitute the project identified in this California Environmental Quality Act. Is
Thank
that
you.
what you're saying, Mr. Newman, or Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Very good. Madam Clerk, would you please call the motion?
Yes. Councilmember Newman,
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adam,
Yes.
and Mayor McNamee.
Yes.
And that motion passes 4-0 with Councilmember Engler absent.
Thank you so much. Next, we move on to 13B, retired annuitant appointment. And city staff, we have Mr. Tim Giles, Human Resource Director, for the presentation. Mr. Giles.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The recommendation before you tonight on this item is to approve the appointment of Cynthia Rodriguez as a retired annuitant hourly employee, to approve the transfer of an existing budget funds and authorize expenditure of those funds as outlined in the staff report, and find that the action does not constitute as a project as defined in CEQA. Under CalPERS rules, when an employee retires from the city and retires in the CalPERS system, you're not allowed to go back in and continue to accrue time in that system. There are some very limited exceptions where a retiree can come back out and work for a city. The exception that we're looking at here tonight is when you have a retired annuitant who would be coming back to a part-time employment situation, that they have skills that are needed to perform the work that is needed by the city, and it's for a limited duration. This temporary employment situation is limited to a maximum of 960 hours per fiscal year. Ms. Rodriguez served as the city clerk for a number of jurisdictions, culminating with a number of years with the city of Thousand Oaks. She's very familiar with the election process, and particularly as that applies in our city. She has knowledge and skills that will be very helpful in assisting staff and the council in navigating this process that you were just discussing. And so we would request the council's concurrence to authorize her to be brought back as a retired annuitant hourly employee. And that is staff's report, available for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Giles. Council members, any questions of Mr. Giles? We good? And I see we do not have any public comment on this. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
Correct.
Excellent, excellent. Council discussion. Mr. Adam.
Move the appointment of Cindy Rodriguez as a retired annuitant hourly employee. Be nice to welcome Cindy back.
Any other discussion, comments? Hold on. And
We could also have items 2 and 3 on the.
items 2 and 3. So you moving 13B, 1, 2,
I
and 3?
move item B, 1, 2, and 3.
Well stated. Excellent.
Or not 3.
Well, 3 you have to.
That's the CEQA thing.
Exactly.
Do I have to move that
We have
too?
to say that also.
Oh, yes, okay, 1, 2, and 3.
I personally would like to say that it's a welcomed return of Cindy Rodriguez.
Yeah.
She brings a level of expertise to the table to guide us through this process. And it's similar as Mark Town came back to help us guide us through the general plan. And I was, unfortunately, when Mark came on, or Mark retired, I was coming on, and I said, well, I'm never going to be able to work with the man. And sure enough, he came back, and here I am with Cindy Rodriguez, and I welcome her back. I'm looking forward to this. So we have a motion on the table, and Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Newman,
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Adam,
Yes.
and Mayor McNamee.
Yes.
And that motion passes 4-0 with Councilmember Engler absent.
Let's move down to City Manager, Ms. Ingra Hardy. Any comments?
Great, thank you, Mayor. Our next City Council meeting will take place on April 25th. We will have a public hearing on our user fees, including our development impact fees, a 73-unit apartment complex on Long Court, and also a public hearing on our CDBG action plan. We also have a department report on Lynn Road and Hillcrest Drive bike lanes and pedestrian improvements. And that concludes my comments.
I'd like to remind everyone about Earth Day happening April 15, a wonderful event. The bounce house is also there for those who are children as well as the adults who are children at heart. I expect to see our council member Al Adam having a wonderful time there. With that said, we're going to adjourn to our next regular meeting, April 25.